While a debate over the Uniform Civil Code in the country is on fire, another survey from News18 has just now come in, and there are various findings which we're going to talk about with Ms. Pinky Anand, somebody, a known name in the industry of law, somebody who's practiced and preached law for a very long time. Ma'am, welcome to CNN News 18. Ma'am, first of all, you've seen these findings that have come in. Very humongous support for a uniform civil code in the country have been extended by Muslim women. How do you see this coming?
This is not the first time. I've seen this much earlier. So when we were having a discussion on triple talaq and in various public forums, including on television networks also, I found that there was such substantial support for doing away with triple talaq amongst the Muslim community, and not only amongst women, by the way, but across the larger community, which included men also. And it was quite surprising to me that there was actually so much support. So frankly, when the Supreme Court passed the judgment, it was a position which was taken keeping, to some extent, even public viewpoint into mind, and keeping the public sympathies, the public expression, the sentiment across board. And the major thing is this, and if you see across other surveys also, if you ask, let us say, amongst the Muslim community, as to what is required in terms of achievement or progress or prosperity, or what is the hallmark, every young individual, every middle-level individual wants growth. They want ultimately to be able to prosper, to do well, to have high values in that. So therefore, happiness has become a criteria which is adopted across communities.
I was speaking to Mr. P.K. Malhotra, former law secretary, a few hours ago. He said that since we have economically and socially grown so much in the past 10 years, this is something which is might be the right time to implement uniform civil code in the country. Do you agree?
Absolutely. In any case, when India became independent and the constitution was taken, constitution came into being, at that time we had just become a fledgling reinvention of independence and therefore new nation. To that extent, we had just come out of the colonial legacies. You had the position where in a number of situations the constitution makers and Dr. Ambedkar, these debates had happened even then, that things should not be done which totally transform the surface and the landscape, and therefore the policies that were continuing were allowed to go on for some time with the expectation that the dynamic constitution would permit the happening, and therefore even a directive principle like Article 44 would take place in any case. If you've seen in today's world, as far as the courts are concerned, as far as law is concerned, almost all directive principles, when we learnt law incidentally, it was that directive principles are unenforceable. Today, directive principles have been incorporated one way or the other in a majority of cases dealing with human dignity into fundamental rights. So maybe they are still not directly enforceable, but one way or the other, the position is becoming such that the directive principles ultimately enforcing a code of conduct for the people is being enforceable through fundamental rights. So therefore, the Uniform Civil Code was not done at that time. It was envisaged. See, all said and done, you had modifications in all religious laws. You had the Hindu Code in 1956. You had the Hindu Succession Act in 2005. You had amendment of the Christian Marriage Act, which was following the archaic English law, and it continued like that till much later, but nonetheless was transformed. So the idea was that human dignity which was valued, so you had to do away with archaic practices that were unacceptable or denigrated, in particular women. You had to bring up those practices both in terms of gender equality, in terms of health, in terms of security, and in terms of human dignity.
You being a woman, and there are two specific findings that we have found out in this particular survey. One is with regards to Muslim women being in a large number opposing something that is called polygamy. How do you respond?
As I told you, I had a similar feeling when I was listening to people and Muslim women specifically speaking about triple talaq. And of course, later on you will find even in the hearings that it was actually said that triple talaq is not being followed too much. So in a sense, it was being followed only in the minority amongst the community. And similarly, you will find for polygamy also. The idea is these practices are inconsistent with the modern, independent, resurgent India that we have today. It just cannot carry on. You cannot. This was an exception. Everybody else had become used to adopting the code which was acceptable across India and across resurgent India, and more so even in the global world. So you have to have a situation where not only do you have to have equality between men and women in a community, but between women in one community and women in another community. So you have so many aspects of non-discrimination that are required to be done, and gradually we have been moving towards that. In fact, I was doing a book and I found this ultimate issue that all values, all concepts, all practices rather, let me put it another way, which are abhorrent to human dignity are being done away with. How can there be any concept of something which is acceptable of one man with 4 women in any given circumstance? I don't want to go further into that. And it doesn't matter where it comes from. For a moment, we do not need to enter into any area which is controversial to the extent of dealing it with religion. You cannot have any practice which is derogatory of human dignity. And that is the manner in which we have time and again interpreted our Article 21. We have done that, for example, of entry of women into temples. That all those issues came up. You had practices which were there, you had laws that were there. They were done away either by the government, or they were done away by the court, or they were done away by statute.
Another finding that comes out in the survey is that a lot of people, including a lot of women, have voted that the age of marriage, specifically Muslim women, have voted that the age of marriage should be increased for women to be 21 or 18. So, do you agree with this? Because the Sharia law also allows for women, when they are hitting puberty, to actually get married. So, do you think that this should change?
See, again, Child Marriage Act, which was basically a secular position, was allowed to continue during British times because British did not want to ultimately deal with Indian traditions, so to say, or practices, and to do anything which was novel because they wanted to rule. That era is well over. The colonial period is well over. Now we are into our independent India, and that's why I mentioned health as a criteria. The reason of age and of having a minimum age is principally for the reason of health. The fact that you become mature both in terms of body as well as in mind before you engage into a relationship which you are to carry, hopefully, for the rest of your life. In that case, you have to have a minimum age prescribed, which is again commensurate with the health and well-being of a woman. And therefore, you'll find the support. See, that's what I'm saying. Everything has changed because all the younger people, all the middle-aged people in particular, have taken a different task. They are seeing a new India. They want a new India even more so. They want their growth, and how do they get their growth? If they are compromised in terms of health, in terms of economics, in terms of social discrimination, they can't do it. They want to be in the mainstream. They want to be into the stream which takes them forward. And you can only do so if you start, for example, a major part of your life, like marriage you're saying, by an age which is acceptable, which is doable, which is safe, and which is secure.
Last and final question. What, according to you, since you've been a student of law, you've preached law, you've argued law for a long time, what could be inclusions, or since it's a very diverse country, what could be an inclusion according to you that could come up in a uniform civil code?
See, the inclusions simply mean that all such practices that deal with men, women, children should be ones that withstand the scrutiny of human dignity. That includes maintenance, that includes succession, that includes divorce, because divorce, incidentally, is not a matter of marriage. It is separating and what should happen in those situations. Therefore, for example, maintenance has also been deemed in the context of a destitute woman. What do? You can't throw a woman out of her house without taking care of her. And if these practices ultimately are kept in mind, the minimum age that a woman should get married in, it has nothing to do with religion. It is to do with your body, it is to do with your mind, it is to do with your well-being, it is to do with your health, it is to do with your education, it is to do with your being able to make up your mind as to what you want to do for a life partner. So if we actually see these practices which, for example, deal with divorce, which deal with succession, which deal with age of marriage, which deal with custody of children, even now you'll find, for example, custody of children, the Guardian and Wards Act in our country is a secular act which deals with all communities. It doesn't differentiate between any religion. And that is what you again need to do for the welfare of those children that you're talking about. So these few things that need to be done, which have been overlooked because of this circumspection about possibly dealing with anybody's sentiment. This is not a matter of today. Even your survey supports this, that this is the manner in which you should go, and courts have done it. Lily Thomas, you had ultimately Shaira Bano. Each of these judgments is outlined, Sarla Mudgal, these judgments have all outlined the fact that you basically need to put this in commensurate with human dignity, and that is what all that we are reaching. Wasn't sati done away with? It was a practice that was considered very, very traditional practice which was indulgent, but ultimately you felt you can't burn a woman on a pyre and think that that is something which is excused because it is a practice. No practice anywhere which is derogatory has to be allowed to be continued in whichever fashion it comes, and that is what we want, ultimately a human dignity issue.
This was Senior Advocate, former Additional Solicitor General of India, Pinky Anand, speaking to us over our survey on Uniform Civil Code and the whole debate that is going across around it.